Doctor, happy Monday. Are you well?
I'm very well, thank you very much. Do you know what? I've just read a really exciting science story. Scientists have sent moss into space and shown that it's really tough. They actually put moss on the outside of the International Space Station, admittedly within a tube, so it wasn't in a vacuum, but it was outside the ISS, exposed to all the radiation that's there. And they did that for 9 months. And then they brought the moss babies back to Earth and grew them, and 80% of them grew. So these are effectively the spores, the sporophytes that moss uses to plant new moss. And it seems that it's really tough and hardy and can withstand enormously intense ultraviolet, which is what you get up there in space. And so this sort of shows us how these sorts of plants can and do survive in extreme environments. It also perhaps points to how mosses were the first things to invade the land when life moved out of the oceans and onto the land about 450, 500 million years ago. Mosses were the first things to do that. This is perhaps because they were so resilient. But it also opens the door to understanding better how we can grow things in foreign places and foreign planets even, by understanding this biology. I just thought that was extraordinary that someone put moss on the International Space Station and brought it back, and 9 months later it was still alive.
The fact that somebody even thought about it, that is absolutely fascinating. Thank you so much, Doctor, for sharing that with us. All right, we go to the lines 0727021702 for your WhatsApp messages. Hi, Dr. Chris and Lebogile. What are the effects of eating carnivorous animal meat products in the human body long-term? Example, lion, crocodile, or hyena. This is from Hola in Ekurhuleni.
Hi, Hola. Well, the answer is that meat is meat. It's a protein. And an animal that's eaten other meat to make its protein, assuming the other meat is healthy, the animal's body has processed, dismantled its diet into its building blocks of amino acids, brought those inside the body and then reassembled them into its own protein, its own muscle, that we then eat. So if there's no other problem with what the animal is eating, there's no problem with us eating that animal. And meat is effectively therefore meat. But not all meats are made equal. Remember that there's dark meat and there's a lighter meat. The darker meats, the red meats, tend to be higher in fat. They tend to be higher in saturated fat, and they tend to therefore be regarded as less healthy for you than whiter, leaner meats, like, for instance, chicken, paler meat. But all things being equal, meat is meat, protein is protein, and it can form part of a healthy diet. If you ate it exclusively, didn't eat anything else, that wouldn't be good. If you didn't have any meat at all, you have a higher risk of developing protein deficiencies, but also especially iron deficiencies, because we get a lot of our iron from the meat that we eat. So part of a balanced diet shouldn't be a problem at all.
Something you just said there made me think about something, Doc. There's a trend of people, I'm not sure if you've seen this, where they go on what I don't know if they call it a carnivore diet, but what the diet is they only eat red meat and eggs in different shapes and forms. And some of them will talk about how their hormones are balanced out, they're not breaking out, they've lost weight. And to me, I thought that is really odd if that is all you are eating. So no vegetables, no fruits. I don't know if you've heard of any studies or research on that, but why are people claiming that they feel so much better, they don't have bloating, but all they are eating are eggs in different ways, be it fried or boiled, and red meat?
Well, to take another food analogy, I think they're nuts. This doesn't sound like a healthy diet whatsoever. We have evolved over millions of years to extract all the micronutrients we need and to live healthily when we eat a healthy diet, and that means a balanced diet that is replete with representation of all the main food groups. You need some carbohydrates, you need some protein, and you need some fats. And you need all those things because all of those are essential to your body. There are certain fats that we can't make in our body. We can't survive without proteins because there are some amino acids which we need to make our proteins, which we can't make in our body. So if you don't eat a source of those amino acids in the form of protein of some description, you're going to be less well off. And carbohydrates are really important for giving us sustained energy release in the form of starches, but also an instant sugar fix when we need energy in a hurry. That's where the sugars come in. So if you eat a balance of all of those things, where about half your energy comes from fat, about a third comes from proteins, and the rest from carbs, then that's absolutely fine. And most people do very well on that sort of diet. If you start eliminating food groups on no evidence base whatsoever, just because you read it in a book or it sounds good, Yeah, you might insist that it's making you feel better because of some kind of placebo effect, but I guarantee this is not good for your physiology or your biochemistry, and there will be long-term health consequences. A balanced diet with all the main representatives, and especially plenty of soluble fibre, is really important for bowel and microbiome health. And if you don't have a good amount of fruit and vegetables, which provides a lot of that soluble fibre and the other micronutrients that select for those microbes, you are going to have less good bowel bacterial health.
All right, thank you so much. David from Pretoria, go ahead.
Hi, Relevokile. Hi, Dr. Smith. So I'm a long distance runner and I'm someone who tries and keep healthy and I try and avoid eating sugary stuff, taking fizzy drinks. I just want to find out, however, on long runs, like when you're doing very long runs for like 2 or 3 hours, we then end up taking sugar and cold drink. I just want to find out, is that bad or is that fine? Is it good if you're doing long runs?
Hi, David. What do you call a long run? I mean, do you do it by time or are you actually going by distance?
So we sometimes do marathons, sometimes to go for 50 kilometers. So we do very long distances and we run up to 5-6 hours at times.
That's amazing, especially if you're doing 50 kilometres in 5 hours. Wow. You certainly beat me. I managed to do a half marathon in the time. I knew I shouldn't be a runner, right? When I watched the guys doing the London Marathon, usually it's Eritreans and Ethiopians, and I watched them finish the whole London Marathon in the time it takes me to do half a marathon. I don't think I'm set out to be a runner. But the bottom line is that when you're running, when you're physically very active, your body is using enormous amounts of energy. Now, when you train to do long distance exercise, you become really good at liberating calories from a range of sources. And this includes carbohydrates and glycogen, because the first thing that your body does when it wants to obtain energy quickly is it goes for glucose. And glucose is stored in the body in the form of glycogen. The liver stores a lot of glycogen, which is a big polymer. It looks like a snowflake of glucose molecules stuck together. Snowflake because you can easily, wherever you start, chip off loads of molecules all over the place really quickly, big sugar rush. And then the liver exports that sugar into the bloodstream. But muscles also store huge amounts of glycogen. And so when you start exercising, the first thing your body does is to go for its glycogen. Thank you very much. I'll use that as an energy source. Once that's depleted, which once you're doing a lot of exercise for a long period of time, that is going to disappear. You will start to liberate more glucose from other sources like the liver, but you will also start to burn off fats because you will start to mobilize fats in the form of fatty acids, which are taken up by active respiring muscle, and they will burn as well. And so if you need to supplement the energy supply when you're running and you take some sugar, that is absolutely fine, because what's going to happen is glucose and small sugar molecules are really rapidly absorbed. The intestine is brilliant at picking them up. They go straight into the bloodstream, and your body will be actively trying to scavenge glucose out of the blood to put into the muscles, because muscles will upregulate the transporters that pull glucose in when they are trained and when they're very active. So that glucose is immediately going to go where it's needed, and it will immediately be burned to help you keep on exercising. So an active sportsman or woman should not worry about taking some extra sugar when they're active, because that glucose is instantly going to get used. The problem comes with high glucose intake when we are not doing very much. We suddenly eat a lot of sugar or drink a lot of sugar, and what happens is that the bloodstream sees a big spike in sugar, and the tissues don't need that big spike in sugar. So the body says, we better do something with this sugar. So it then releases a big surge of insulin. The insulin turns the sugar into a form that goes into our cells and turns into fat, because you're not consuming it actively. And that's how you end up putting on weight, because you end up with a big surge in sugar, big surge in insulin, that turns into fat, puts down your blood sugar, and then you feel hungry again. So what do? Reach for more sugary snacks, and the cycle perpetuates. And that's why a sugary diet, fizzy drinks and so on, tends to translate into weight gain if you are not physically active and consuming the sugar when you need it.
All right, another question that has come through says, Doctor, why is it that when we weigh ourselves in the morning, when we wake up, we always weigh less than the previous night, even if we never go to the loo? That's Mosa.
Hello, Mosa. The answer is that although you have gone to sleep and not gone to the loo, you haven't switched off your metabolism. You are still breathing as well. And two things happen. When we're metabolizing, we are burning fuel in the body, which is either the sugars we were just talking about, or fats, or both. And when you burn something, you turn it into carbon dioxide. So the carbon in the fuel, the sugar, is just carbon molecules. Fat is lots of carbon molecules. When you burn those with the oxygen you breathe in, you actually turn it into CO2, carbon dioxide. Where does that go? Well, you breathe it out. So in the same way that when you fill your car with fuel and the fuel tank weighs something, you take that liquid, the car runs until the tank is empty, the car now weighs less because it's chucked all of the carbon that was in the tank in the form of fuel out of the exhaust pipe in the form of CO2. So you will lose weight just by burning the fuel inside your body. The other thing that happens is that when you're sleeping, you're breathing. And when we're breathing, as you know, on a cold day, you're breathing out water vapor because all of the respiratory surfaces inside your body, from the ends of your airways down your lungs, right up the back of your throat, through your nose, they're all moist. They're covered in a film of water. And as the air comes out, it comes out saturated with water from your body, and that weighs something. And if you measure, the average person breathes out about half a litre of water every day. So if you spend 8 hours asleep, then that's about a third of the day. So that's about a third of half a litre, which is about a sixth of a litre, which is a couple of 100 grams straight away. So when you add all those effects together, both metabolising sugars and other fuels and breathing out water, that is why the average person you would expect would lose weight overnight, assuming they don't just go to the loo or wet the bed.
Thank you so much for that question. Good afternoon, Lebogile. Please ask about mental health effects of using Chat GPT for long periods.
Well, this was a story recently, wasn't it? And we've seen a couple of people who have been quite involved in the AI industry are saying that this is the stuff of nightmares and it keeps them up at night. And we've had cases where people are actually mounting lawsuits against some of these large language model platforms because they're arguing that the advice they received or the relationships they formed with these systems led to a state of mental ill health, either because it made them develop delusions, or it made them very depressed, or it made them do things that they would otherwise not have done, such as self-harm. So there is a very big concern about this. And the other big concern is that people tend to develop relationships with these machines, which, quite frankly, the machine doesn't care about you because it has no feelings. And people are replacing these sorts of platforms. Their friends are being replaced by these sorts of platforms. So instead of healthy social interactions, which have restorative effects on so many levels, when you're engaging with another person, it's very, very beneficial for your well-being. It's a support network. It helps you when you need help. The computer doesn't care. And people are substituting their real friends for these electronic so-called friends. And it probably is a recipe for ill health in the long term in a range of different ways. So many people are concerned about this, and it's an active area of research. But obviously it's very early days, and research comes from data. And data is what is being collected at the moment. I should more accurately say data are what are being collected at the moment. So it's early days, but there is early indications that this could have problems in store if we're not careful.
All right, let's see if we can get to the last one. Dr. Smith, I've been working from home for the past 5 years, so I don't come into contact with my colleagues' germs anymore. Over the past 6 months, I've started developing flu-like symptoms, muscle and joint pain each time I go to the shopping center or when I'm around crowds. Am I allergic to people?
Quite possibly. I mean, what we have seen is because of what happened during the pandemic, many of the manoeuvres and measures that were put in place, they're called non-pharmaceutical interventions, NPIs, things like social distancing, self-isolation, wearing face coverings, not going out, all those sorts of things led to a disruption in the pattern of diseases that we would normally catch. The average adult catches 2 or 3 fresh new virus infections every single year, or did. This has the effect of topping up our immunity. And what we saw because of the disruption to the world population of COVID interventions, where we stopped the circulation of many of these things, as well as individuals taking steps to not catch things, has meant that many people have not had the normal pattern of exposure to the normal things that they previously had. This has led to a lower level of underlying immunity in those people. So people are catching things clinically that they would previously have brushed off. Let me explain. When I ask people in wintertime, have you had the flu this year? You'll get people who say yes, people who say no. if you ask the people who say no to do a blood test, you can show that half the time they actually had the flu without realising it because they had underlying immunity. But if you don't expose them to a flu for a few years, that underlying immunity slowly dwindles and the flu changes. So when they next catch flu, they don't have it asymptomatically, they know all about it. And we think this is happening to an extent in people all over the world. They distanced themselves, they didn't catch stuff for a number of years or for a couple of seasons. Their underlying immunity was not refreshed. So now people are catching things again, and they're catching them often all at once, which makes them feel doubly bad. So there is a price to be paid for that couple of years of respite we had over COVID when we didn't catch as many things as we would do normally. Now it's catch-up time, and some people are getting caught out and not feeling too good.
All right, that's all we have time for, Dr. Chris Smith. As much as I love spending time with you.
Oh, it's mutual. But we'll see each other next week, won't we?
We'll see each other next week.